Good morning. Pardon the delay. You wouldn't believe what it was again. Guess what? It was the cameras. So stupid. So stupid. I thought I would have to update my iPhone just to get it to work. It would not register. It would not find it. It would not see it. So I've been sitting here for 5 minutes, restarting my computer, starting my browser over. I did all the same things. And then finally I said, I got to do one more time. I got to try it one more time. Restart my browser at this point, and suddenly it works. Who knows? I was ready to go with the old camera built in, but that one's a piece of shit. How in the hell can none of this stuff be simple? I don't get it. Like, how many people stream daily? How many people stream daily? And there is no product on the market that just allows you to stream live. There's just no such thing. Now, I know I've threatened to destroy printers in the past on this show because they also suck. And I've mentioned a few times that I would shoot it with my gun out in Vermont in front of the, on my yard at the farm. I don't have a gun here on this island because you can't buy guns here. But still, I mean, really. And, so I say I'll destroy a printer. I want to shoot some of this Apple tech. I want to shoot it with a gun. I want to blow it up. It's terrible. It's the dumbest shit in the world. How in the hell? Now, I know people say get something else besides Apple and blah, blah, blah. But I've been down that road and I hate those things even more, right? When you're sitting in the registry of a computer and of a PC and you're trying to figure it out, it's a nightmare. Like, I don't want any of that. I want a button, right? And I want to hit the button and I want to go live. What is wrong with this world? Anyway, I don't want to keep complaining, guys. It's fine. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Now, I just got to remind you all that I noticed something this morning and it was the sun is up. So the sun is totally up, right? So we don't need to complain about computers and phones and cameras and stuff like that, right? We don't need that because Bitcoin is running. What else do we need? Let's have some coffee and talk about what's new, right? David says, shoot it live during the show. I'm going to. Yeah, when I get back, there's a guarantee, I promise you guys, when I get back to the farm. So I ended up breaking that printer that I had there. And I broke it, you know how it was built in with a photocopier, right? So the glass thing, I just gave it one punch one day and that was the end of that. So it's all broken glass inside anyway. It still prints. It still prints. But I'm going to destroy it. I'm done with that one. I got one here that doesn't work. I might as well blow that thing up. That thing just I've never got it to work one time. So that thing sucks. So there you go. And Justin says I got a Operation Choke Point on me. Yeah. Imagine. Well, we're going to talk about that stuff today, about targeting of individuals. That's our theme, right? Individuals who are targeted. At least Bitcoin is running. Thank you, Bitcoin Graffiti. You had the wise words of the morning. Bitcoin is still running. My computer problems and my live stream problems are no one's problem. They're my own problem. I'm not going to have you share my problem. And even the other camera, we did it yesterday. It was fine, right? It was fine. So that's fine. Good morning, Justin. Good morning. Kevin, karate chop indeed, karate chop the like button. We love that. We love karate chops on the like button. Good afternoon. I guess you're in the afternoon place where the sun is already way above you. You should decentralize your setup. Yeah, I've tried. I want to centralize my setup. That's what I'm complaining about. I actually want to centralize my setup. iPad might be the best thing. I've never had troubles when I just ran it off the iPad for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe the iPad really is the streaming tool that everyone's been waiting for, but it's got its own issues. You can't charge it while you use a mic and blah, 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 blah. So if you don't charge it way before, and now I use my iPad to offset my camera problems. I just use this to read my notes, and that works pretty fine. You ever thought, should I do, some people do that when they put they screen share and they put up the news story they're referring to. I don't know if I can do that with all of them, but I have thought about mixing that in. But I think it would take away from the coffee together nature. Like I don't, I can use a whiteboard, but I don't. If I brought all these notes from every story and didn't paint a picture and refer to them and try and describe them to you guys, I don't know. I might lose something. Tell me what you guys think, though. Tell me if you think that I should refer to some of these things live um, instead of that way. But we'll see. P-Man Van, no, it's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same. P-Man Van, exactly. Shoot it live during the show. I will. Sorry, that's the one you already mentioned. Yeah. Clown World Tech Companies. Use OBS. I think I do. I'm not sure. I know what I program every day into this restream thing is something like that, but I'm not sure if it's that. I see OBS written when I'm loading up the show every morning. Now you again know how normal people feel when they start with wallets. I am always on the side of people who are having trouble with wallet tech. I have struggled with it for years. Honestly, I have. I've lost Bitcoin. I've screwed things up. So I've always had sympathy. If you want another OG that is very vocal about the troubles of self custody and in a thoughtful way, it's Bruce Fenton. Bruce Fenton. If you guys don't follow him, I recommend following Bruce Fenton anytime. A really great guy, really thoughtful person, a real Bitcoiner, just awesome. And he's been talking about this for a while. My solution at the bank when I worked with Kraken was around those lines. I mean, that's why we did the combination of the bailment accounts, which you're hearing all about now with the Custodia news and Caitlin Long. So Caitlin Long and Kraken, so Custodia, Avanti before it was named, and Caitlin Long and Kraken worked together on forming the laws in Wyoming for a Bitcoin bank, which is based on bailment accounts, which means it's a safety deposit box for your cash. And there's fungibility aspects. If you don't know what fungibility is, everyone, $101 bills are equal to one $100 bill, right? Because you can use them both in the same way. So the fungibility of money is very important. 250s equals 100, two different hundreds, one brand new, one crinkled up. You can feel fungibility, for example, the issues of fungibility whenever you see, this happens in Canada from time to time, when we switch our specie, the bills, they'll start saying at various stores, we don't take old 50s anymore. We don't take old hundreds anymore. So right away, that's a fungibility issue, right? The old hundred physical bill is no longer useful and the new 100 is. So I've seen that before in my life in Canada. So fungibility does come into play in Bitcoin when you start hearing about tagged coins. Ordinals brings up issues of fungibility that I'm not concerned with, but that is part of the discussion. So just a quick lesson on fungibility. So as an idea to get your mind around what they're doing in Wyoming and with Kraken Bank as well, that was the thing. You could put a Bitcoin into an account and you can get the same UTXO out, right? So you could actually know which money is yours and keep it segregated from others, not commingling of accounts in conjunction. So whenever you hear someone say proof of reserves isn't enough, they're correct. Proof of reserves with a legal structure around bailment, like I've described, for holding your account, for holding your deposits, that itself creates what I think is a functional Bitcoin bank and could get around some of the issues of self custody. But the future is self custody, guys. So I'm only describing a way station, a through point, a place to get us used to all this, because as you know, if you're a long time joiner of the Breakup in the morning, you'll know that we think AI is going to manage all of our Bitcoin very well, right? Very, very well. Satoshi Wedding Murders paints a picture of the science fiction story that I wrote that we're almost there. We're getting close to 1,000, guys. We're moving up quick. So I think we're almost at 600 today, subscribers on YouTube. And once we get to 1,000, I think I'll have the group I need to push the book out into the world. I'm gonna need it though. I gotta move quick because people are getting their minds around all of this stuff, and I don't want to lose my advantage. I've been ahead on a lot of my predictions, and now people are starting to realize what AI is, and they're starting to catch up. It's not robots. It's like people who hallucinate and lie. I was the first one to predict that. So I didn't even know they would be using the words hallucination, right? A hallucination of an AI, but that's what happens. They hallucinate indeed. So that's what's going on, right? So there is a world where starting with wallets, and it doesn't necessarily get easier. But again, I definitely think the future is self custody, but there is this way station. There is a transfer period, transition period, I guess you want to call it. Oh, Joe, I love the comment. Thanks a lot. The best morning broadcast on earth. I think so. I think if you follow this show, right, if you come together with us every morning, you're probably at least a week ahead of the normie news, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a month, in some cases many years ahead. But we are definitely here to protect you from the bad vibes that come out of the other morning shows who are trying to deal with the news as it comes, right? We kind of see it come a few days in advance, right? We're pretty good at that if you look at our track record. So there you go. Defino, what's up? Finally checking in live from Australia. Great, Louis. Welcome, 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 Louis. We're glad you made it. We're glad you made it. Yeah, defo share screen videos. Okay, fair trade. Kevin says your current style is more organic. Yeah, I want to make sure it forces me to describe things, and I think that is something good. I might try and share a couple screens, fair trade trousers, to see how it goes. And I prefer humanless tech. I prefer face and hands pointing. Yeah, that I feel like that's part of it, right? Because again, what we want to, what I think this should feel like is coming together for coffee in the morning before the deluge of psyops roll over you on social media, right? This way, at least you have an anchor. We're going to be talking about anchor bias today. At least you have an anchor to not get blown in the wind too much. And I need it as much as you guys. I don't want to get blown in the wind. So if I say these things out loud in the morning, I'm not going to worry about them for the rest of the day. So that's what we're trying to do here, right? Bud says, "I don't need notes." Great, thanks for the note, Bud. Good morning, Daniel. Occasional pick or link. Yes, Robert. Yeah, it could happen. Let's try it. Mm-hmm. And the live feel. Yeah, we like the live feel, right? We like the live feel. 1,000 by the conference, Daniel says. 1,000 by the. We'll get there. I think we're going to get there before. I started using Unchained. Excellent choice. Excellent choice, Boo Boo. We like it. Ben Gurtzel work on decentralization of II. Yeah, the Ben Rommel is getting close. I mean, he's there. Or Brian Rommel, pardon me. We've been talking about him a lot lately. Sorry I'm late. I got caught up reading the Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generational Warfare you mentioned a few weeks ago. Isn't it good? Isn't it good? I think so. I agree. This show turns me out. Good, Boo Boo Bodacious. That's what we want, right? We're here to be optimistic. We are inherently optimistic, so we want to share the optimism in dark times, right? And they're not even that dark. We're so close. We're so close to big change, and we're going to talk about that today, right? So, but first, as you know, we like to start every show with the fakest news we can find. So, a lot going on in America. I had plenty of choices of fake news. I didn't want to get into, I don't talk about school stuff. Okay, you're never going to hear that on this show. You're never going to hear that stuff that happens in America. I'm not interested. Right? Schools, yes. Other stuff with people, and I don't care. It's disgusting, and I don't want to talk about it. So we're not going to talk because there was a whole bunch of fake news that came with it, right? And I don't want to talk about that. That stuff sucks. What I will talk about, despite all the craziness in the world, is the following article from USA Today. Right? They say anxiety surges as Donald Trump may be indicted soon. Why 2024 is the final battle and the big one. All right, so walls are closing in on Trump, according to USA Today. The walls are closing in. MSNBC had a bunch of walls are closing in articles today. They're great. So the one from the USA Today, I think, is talking about the Alvin Bragg New York City indictment, the one that we were talking about last week, right? So the walls are closing in on the Stormy Daniels payments, right? MSNBC took another angle, and now it's about the Mar-a-Lago case. It's about the document case, right? So Breaking the cone of silence between Donald Trump and his attorney, Evan Corcoran, may be the fatal blow for Trump in the Mar-a-Lago investigation. So many walls are closing in on Trump. I think he's cooked, guys. They got him this time. It's over. It's done. They're going to get him on the Stormy Daniels one. I'm sure of it. I'm sure. So now, despite all that fake news, we have what looks like fake news, but apparently isn't. And it's Christine Lagarde, the European Central Bank president. When we look back at the people, the characters, the players in World War III, Yellen is going to stand out, right? Joe Biden is going to stand out with his ice cream and all that stuff, right? It's all going to be great. But Christine Lagarde might be the dumbest one of the lot. And that's not easy. I mean, seriously, you're up against Yellen and you're up against Biden. And she somehow is, and it's not a cognition thing. It looks like her brain power is the highest of all of them. Yet she sounds the dumbest. She sounds the least self-aware. It's amazing, right? I don't understand it. But here's what she said. So they're talking about CBDCs now, right? They're talking about CBDCs. She's talking about what's going on with the tech and what's going on with implementation and what's happening and this and that. So she says that banks will lose control if they don't use a CBDC and that they will lose their anchoring effect. She said it out loud. She says they're going to lose their anchoring effect, right? Their anchoring effect. Now, in case you guys don't know what anchor bias is, I'm going to share it with you. Anchor bias is when the simplest example is when you are presented with a piece of information and you disproportionately use that piece of information to make a decision. So the easiest one is a sale, right? 75% off, right? You might not have needed it. I know plenty of people, my wife, I saved 75%, right? But you didn't need the thing in the first place. Like I tell her that all, not all the time, but here and there. It happens to me. I'll see a deal and I'll say, oh, I'm going to save $80 on these shoes. I don't need the shoes, but I get to save $80. But then you still have to spend the $50 or whatever, right? So that's a little bit of how anchor bias works. It's when you come with a little bit of information and you rely too heavily on that information to make decisions. So anchor bias in finance is just the same thing, right? It's when people rely too much on a piece of information to make investment decisions. So, in general, you would like to think most people consider logic when making investment decisions. That is never the case. It's just never the case. We don't act that way. We don't think that way. Human beings are not built that way. Morgan Housel has a book called The Psychology of Money that I've brought up a few times here. And he says that, quote, that I actually said before I read his book, which is that we're dealing with numbers, but there's no math involved, right? It's not math. Finance is taught like math. It's taught like reading spreadsheets and understanding balance sheets and understanding money in, money out. Now, you have to be able to be literate in all of these things, of course. No one is denying that, right? But when we're discussing anchor bias, we're discussing finance. In the end, psychology has a much bigger role than the logic we use. So the numbers become misleading. They make you think you're dealing with a purely logical field when you're not even close, right? Mostly psychological. So most financial decisions in the end are based on irrelevant and illogical data. I mean, almost all the time. So the reasons for this are humans will fill in the blank, right? If they want something, they will generally come up with reasons for it, right? They'll make a decision and then rationalize it after the fact. That's pretty much standard operating procedure. So critical thinking, and these things exist in the real world, in real life, you can actually apply them. But most of the time, when it comes to finance, most of the time, when it comes to economic decisions, it's not what's actually being played. So for her to come out and mention anchor bias and that they'll lose their anchor, right? Someone like me who spends all of this time together talking about how incentives matter the most, how incentives lead us to making decisions, and that's much more important than the logic behind making a decision. Incentives and pushing people in a direction because it makes the most emotional sense. It makes the most self-preservational sense, right? You want to be healthy, you want to be happy, you want all of these things. Having incentives in place that get people there are much better than teaching them and explaining to them, you have to eat this much to be healthy, right? Usually breaking the spell of those who would addict you to dopamine and would addict you to the instant gratification of sweet foods and all that is far more important than just information about diet and those kinds of things. So, what does this say? Thinking fast and slow covers anchor bias and much more about how we are wired. Yeah, I'll have a look at that, boo boo. I'll have a look at that. So, I pick on what's her name because she comes out and says, right, we want anchor. We are the anchor. We are the anchor bias. And indeed, that's the game here, right? Bitcoin as an anchor bias could incentivize a world that has a much greater emphasis on personal health simply because you've removed the addictive actors from the game if you do it right? If you change time preference, if you go through all the other consequential changes that happen to each individual when they embrace Bitcoin, when they go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. That's why you start hearing about health, and that's why you start hearing about time preference, and that's why you start hearing about instant gratification and the dangers therein. And you start to hear a lot about anxiety. Now, just think about what's going on with this Trump thing, for example, that we just mentioned, right? They say right in the article, anxiety surges. Is my anxiety surging according to USA Today? I mean, right? I've already exited the panopticon of mainstream media, looking at how everyone's reacting to different events and provoking reactions with certain news stories. So, because I'm a Bitcoiner, I've fallen away from that sphere. I don't even think about it. Do I have anxiety about Trump being indicted? Zero. Obviously not, right? But lots of people do. Lots of people have had anxiety for Trump for a long time. The media's fault, of course, right? Calling him all the names they call him, encouraging people. If you like I did the other day, and I did again today. You go on MSNBC. Despite all that's going on in the world, half the articles on MSNBC's Twitter feed are about Trump. Half. I mean, literally half. Sometimes it's 80%, right? So you wonder why people are anxious when all that's being mentioned is just how terrible Orange Hitler is. That this is the result you're going to get every time, right? You're going to get this result almost every time. Now, here, what we talk about are the different incentives that Bitcoin proposes for your mental health that result in better mental health, physical health, right? All of these things happen as we change the anchor, right? Having a different anchor will create different biases and lead you to different outcomes. And that's not really what's going on here, right? We've got emotional trouble all over the place with the dollar being what it is, with the economic system being what it is, with the economy being what it is, with the political system being what it is. But all of those things are anchored in the fiat system. It's all anchored in the way money propagates commercial relationships in our society. And all commercial relationships based on this system, on the fiat system, produce these results because that's the system at this point. It's designed to do that, right? So when you hear this story, right, here's one from Italy, right? So Italy, they've had a lot of change. We've talked about their recent prime minister. She sounds great. She's been talking about the perversion of central banks. She's been talking about the perversion of pan or supranational authority, so the EU, and its effect on Italian domestic policy. She blames the whole Libya situation on America and the EU and says that more or less she had a deal, or Italy had a deal with Libya years ago about oil and energy. It was scuttled because it affected American markets and to a certain extent European producers, and therefore was destroyed. And the net result is Italy has to deal with more migrants. Italy has to deal with lack of energy, and none of it was Italy's sovereign choice. All these choices were made outside of Italy, yet Italy is paying the bill. So Italy came out, right, and still tries to exercise some sovereignty, and they did so when it came to their food, when it came to physical health. Italians, of course, extremely proud about their food, the diet, what they eat, and of course it's great, right? I'm not a huge pasta fan, but I definitely like the food in Italy, and would never say no to a carb-rich Italian meal in Italy, even though I prefer on my day-to-day to have steaks and all that kind of stuff. So, but I know I wouldn't want this, and this is what Italy has just banned. Italy has banned the cricket flour. Remember we talked about cricket flour that the EU has proposed as a new substitute for flour. They allowed the labeling of it, and of course they never label it as crickets. They use the Latin, I can't remember, cocacella, something stupid like that. I don't know what it's called. I'm never going to learn the Latin name for crickets. Well, I guess I'll have to. I don't want to eat it, but I would never even come close to eating something with that in it, I think. So they were going to start mixing this insect flour with your normal grain flour and put it in pizza dough. They were going to put it in pasta, all this kind of stuff. So Italy has banned it, right? They've said, and the headline here, Italy bans insect flour from its pasta despite eco buzz, right? There's buzz around it, right? The buzz, of course, is entirely fake. The buzz is from anchor bias. It's from people who would deceive you and suggest, as we talked about yesterday, that the cow farts are the big problem. And as Bill Gates has been saying, the burps, right? It's not just the farts now. It's now the farts and the burps. I hadn't heard burps as a complaint until Bill Gates brought it up the other day, right? So now it's the burps. It's the farts and the burps of the cows. It's not just them. And I think, was it Bill Gates who said we're cooking ourselves? No, that was the economist, right? We're cooking ourselves. We're cooking ourselves, right? Okay. If you want to talk about emotional and physical abuse. So Italy bans insect flour from its pasta despite the eco buzz, right? So the subheadline is the growing use in cooking of flour made from crickets, locusts, and insect larvae, so nice, has met fierce opposition in Italy, where the government is to ban its use in pizza, pasta, and segregate it on supermarket shelves. Well, who would be okay with that, right? I think if you'd have told people 10 years ago, before they had been manipulated by anchor bias, that you're going to have, we're going to be separating the insect larva from the normal flour, I think most people, good, right? Great. But now it's controversial, right? Despite the eco buzz, despite what Greta might say. What might Greta say? We can only wonder what Greta might say about the insect larva not being in our pasta. So what happens at the same time as we hear all of this stuff, right? Well, here's a little more anchor bias. This is how it works. This is what the ECB president, Lagarde, is saying. Here's what happens, right? So they ban the insect larva. Boom. The European Commission has frozen 19 billion euros, that's 20 billion US, of a post-pandemic fund for Italy, requesting clarification over Rome's efforts to meet the targets and milestone needed to unlock the money. The targets and milestone, I haven't checked, but let me tell you what I bet they are. What I bet they are is the cows are farting too much, and some of them burp, so you have to eat insects and the larva too in your pasta. Come on, it's obvious, right? So here's what Lagarde is basically saying, right? She's saying we need the anchor, we need to be the organizing principle, we need to be the reference to from which everyone will organize their states and their supra-federal state, right? So, which is just a state, right? Sub-supra-federal is just a state. Italy, So Italy was the first to do this, to ban it. Now they're getting punished. It looks like they're getting punished. Now, I'm the one making this connection between the money not being released and the cricket ban. But I'm telling you now that if you look into these reasons, if you look into the targets and milestones, they're all going to be the gobbledygook of ESG. That's what it is, right? That's what these things are. So that's just one example of a system that has an anchor bias heavily weighted for the entire society, that is not producing and promoting much physical health, that is happy with everyone full of anxiety about what's going on with Donald Trump and the walls are closing in. So Bitcoin's big opportunity remains that the incentives here are no longer lining up with reality. People are realizing they're physically unhealthy. Not everyone, but enough people. More and more every day, right? More and more are realizing this every day. Emotional health, right? How can we say for a second that America has anything resembling emotional health right now? I don't know about what's going on in Europe, but things don't look very emotionally stable in Paris, right? That doesn't look too emotionally stable to me. That looks like they got some issues, emotional issues. That looks like they've got some physical dangers that are clear and present and are causing people to go out on the streets. And it has a lot to do with energy. It has a lot to do with diet. I'm sure there are people protesting there because they're worried about having larvae in their pasta and their bread, right? Insect larvae. Nobody that I know wants to eat insect larvae. Literally nobody. Unless you're completely down the road of how Greta feels about you and thinks about you, I don't think you naturally would ever care to eat bugs ever. Ever. Only an anchor bias of what are the environmental buzz people saying about you would ever lead you down that road, right? Which is why it's manipulated that way, which is why it's presented that way, which is why it's packaged that way. But luckily, the forces of this top-down centralized system that is incoherent in itself and is definitely not coordinated and planned to the extent that some people might fear, makes mistakes every day. It is now just as incompatible in leading individuals to emotional or physical health as it is restorative to itself, in that it can't make itself healthy, right? It can't um, strengthen its own position in anchor bias. It loses people every day. And here's a great example of how they're losing people, right? And this is, I think, an incredibly stupid mistake by the IRS. Incredibly stupid. So here's what the IRS did yesterday. This is for real. They really did this. The American institution of the IRS did this for real. Substack writer Matt Taibbi says the IRS visited his home while he was testifying in Congress. So the guy who has blown the whistle on Twitter files, who went to Congress, and it was a clown show watching people try to interrogate him, so-called journalist and this and that. Matt Taibbi. I mean, not a Trump guy. Remember, not a Trump guy, not a MAGA guy. None of those things. A Rolling Stone writer, one of the last journalists left in America, as far as I can tell. Right? I don't agree with him about everything at all, but I respect the heck out of him. He does his job and does it right, and has an opinion. Sure, I have an opinion. We all have an opinion. His opinion is that the banks are corrupted, that the financial system in 2008 and the response was not properly dealt with, and that Occupy was a major symptom. Occupy Wall Street was a major symptom of a problem that we've used extend and pretend for years to get away from. Right. And he just brought that up. And it's annoying to people who want to manipulate and use anchor bias and go around people who would complain about these things happening. So having the IRS weaponized to this extent, and putting a name to it, right? We can talk about Operation Choke Point 2.0 now with crypto, right? You know, Operation two, Nick Carter talking about it, Choke Point, and then the 1.0, which happened years ago, which was a combination of Obama using the IRS and financial regulations to target political enemies, which happened, right? It really did happen years ago. So choke point, the problem with those ones, the problem with the choke point 1 and choke point 2, it's all kind of amorphous, right? We're not really dealing with. There's a couple agencies and a couple people. I mean, even look at the story today with CZ, right? CZ has been, I guess they're fining him, or the CFTC, the Commodities and Future Trading Commission in New York City, is suing him, or in Chicago, sorry, is suing him or doing something, blah, blah, blah. Now you got to understand, the CFTC was nothing before the '08 crisis. It was empowered to deal with some of the issues that came about from the '08 crisis. So what they're doing here is they're pushing CZ, right? The big long document, all kinds of people talking about it today. But here's one thing they say, and this I'm going to relate it back to, and of course the know-it-alls and financial media laughing today. Oh, CZ, what an idiot, right? Chairman Bernanke, who's been retweeted by Joe Weissenthal. I don't know much about this character. It could be a joke, I guess, but kind of laughing off, oh, CZ tried all these like hokey, childish ways to get around the laws over years, right? Oh, a bunch of stupid people. And one of the smoking guns she uses here is from the indictment itself, CZ's strategy of refusing to implement effective compliance controls at Binance. Effective compliance controls. What the fuck are those? Pardon my swearing. What are those? Is it the KYC thing again? That doesn't work. That doesn't work. They don't catch money launderers, by the way, with the KIC and the AML. That doesn't work. It's never been effective, right? Anchor bias here comes from believing these institutions are actually capable of regulating and do their job. They don't. They don't, right? The Fed didn't regulate the banks. They're the supervisor of U.S. banks. They've known that they're insolvent for months. For months, it's been clear. We talked yesterday about Jerome Powell predicting the interest rate and duration mismatch in 2012 before he was the chair. He knew this was coming in 2012. Anyone who can do arithmetic knows knows that was coming, right? Anyone who understands high school math can understand this is coming. It is not some complexity theater situation, right? Anyone can figure this out. It was obvious to anyone who bothered looking. Bitcoiners have known this for a long time, that there were major issues, right? So here they're saying, CZ doesn't want to use KYC. He doesn't want to do any of these things. Well, it looks like, and this is a legal strategist that I read who had his take on it, and he said, here's what he said. Let me find it. Here it is. So he's an actual attorney, and he says 2 cents. The majority of general allegations relate to 2019-2020 activity centered on the VPN stuff and lack of KYC measures, right? So that they broke rules and they face civil penalties for doing it. But they broke all of these rules before and just did the math on it, right? They just did the math. They did what JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or anyone else does, right? JP Morgan, I'm going to talk about this in a second, knowingly manipulated metals markets and made $50 billion, right? They had to pay a $50 million fine. And it's in the news today. So that's a fine they've already paid, right? You do the math. You go, okay, I made $50 billion and I got to pay a $50 million fine to make the $50 billion. Done. You don't think that someone like CZ wouldn't copy what JP Morgan does as a matter of business? What's the fine? How much am I making? Add them up, right? Which is better? So we're seeing today that this is from 2 days ago, right? That JP Morgan's massive gold derivative short position may be larger than the entire bank's assets. So they're willing to leverage the entire bank's assets to manipulate the gold market. This is from right here. This is Wall Street Silver retweeted this from 2 days ago, right? Now, Is JP Morgan manipulating metal markets? Well, they've already paid a fine for doing it. Are they still doing it? Yeah. What size is it? Looks huge. I don't know the details of what JP Morgan is doing with this market, but it looks huge, right? So CZ did exactly what these other guys do, right? It's a good trade. If you can make this much money and pay this much in a fine, and you go with it, right? So CZ openly acknowledged the structure was flawed, but again, very difficult to comply with US regulators when the people who are even trying, like Coinbase, can't. They say openly, we tried, we can't. Why bother? Why go down that road? It's only compliance for compliance sake. And when the juice isn't worth the squeeze, you just say the hell with it, right? They tried to do the VPN thing. Oh, we're going to put a VPN in and blah, 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 right? But who's playing that game, right? Nobody, because JP Morgan is manipulating it, right? And if he's not part of this anchor bias, I don't know who is, right? JP Morgan, you think if Jamie Dimon doesn't say jump to Christine Lagarde, she doesn't jump? Of course she does, right? They move so much money and are so important to the system, to the anchor that she's talking about preserving, that there's no way, right? There's no way. Now, you can see already that, mainstream news media, the same people laughing at CZ today, the same people laughing at the same people laughing at here's another one. People laughing at Elon Musk. Elon Musk came out yesterday and said that the commercial real estate is the biggest risk to the economy, right? Here's a know-it-all financial journalist. He's one of these guys who puts his picture, because they go on TV sometimes, and he puts his picture from the time he was on TV being smart on some stage, right? On some TV set. I've been on all those fucking TV sets, right? Why would you put your picture because you went on the fake news and it's like you're being pensive, right? This is what he says. So Elon Musk said the state of the commercial real estate debt market is by far the most serious and looming issue, right? I mean, I don't believe that myself, but Elon Musk is a pretty smart guy, and if he says something like that, I'll definitely listen, right? I'm not going to argue it. I don't know the case. Sean Tuffy is his name, right? Sean Tuffy says, I mean, maybe. However, not sure we should listen to a dude who turned 44 billion investment into Twitter into like $20 and $20 million in like 6 months. Jeez, I wonder if he's going to say that on his stupid fake news TV shows. And of course, Joe Weisenthal comments on the tweet with the NPC meme of a bunch of NPC faces saying commercial real estate is the biggest risk to the economy right now, particularly given the high exposure of regional banks. Joe Weissenthal, who hasn't gotten a thing right in 4 years, is calling other people NPCs. He's calling other people NPCs. Joe Weisenthal is doing that in public, for real. And then we get all this credit default swap stuff, what's going on, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, CNBC yesterday, according to Wall Street Silver, erased credit default data from multiple banks. So you can't even tell their exposure anymore. They just removed the data. They don't want people trading off of it. Right? So I would say Joe is from the fintech to tech finance, blah, 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 mainstream media, right? I'm not insulting him by saying that. But here, any comment on CNBC not giving us relative positions on default swaps? It's okay for CNBC to erase it, And his colleague here, or the person he retweeted, right, about CZ's trouble, and then he's talking about how Elon Musk is part of the NPC army because he's worried about commercial real estate. Who isn't worried about commercial real estate? Who the fuck goes shopping in stores? Have you been to Midtown Manhattan lately? Those buildings are empty. No one is in them, and no one's coming. There's nobody coming back. They're not coming back, right? No one's getting an office in Paris. They burnt that city down. It's not happening, right? These things are not happening. Now, if you're worried about mainstream media never talking about important things in the media, well, they finally did yesterday, and it wasn't just Christine Lagarde. Kim.com brings it up. Both CNN and Fox ran stories for their audience about the end of USA's reserve currency status, right? And Kim.com said the following. Well, here's the one from Fareed Zakaria, right? Who, honestly, of all the people, I mean, he said a lot of dumb shit in his life, Fareed Zakaria, but he's one of the only people on CNN that I can actually stomach. Him and what's his name? I like him too. I can't remember his name right now. I've been in the makeup room with him before. Political guy. He started saying nothing burger. He was the first nothing burger, which I think the whole CZ thing is a nothing burger, by the way, the Binance thing, nothing burger. What's his name? Jeez, he's great. I appreciate him a lot. One of the only people, I know, I can't remember his name now. It doesn't matter. There's a couple people on CNN who are not that bad, and he's one of them. Fareed Zakaria, not bad. He says, if the US dollar's global supremacy wanes, America will face a reckoning like never before. Indeed. You get on Fox, this is the story on Fox, global economy churning, a perfect storm could mean end of the US dollar. And Mario Stefano says, this is how now hit Main Street. The loss of U.S. reserve currency, the continuous money printing by the Fed, and the record deficits means the coming loss of the reserve currency. Do you have gold? Perfect storm could mean end of U.S. dollar. So we've got a de-dollarization on CNN, de-dollarization on Fox, and that's just the stuff that's going on, right? Let me find the Kim.com story that I brought up. Anyway, I got a Kim.com. Oh, here it is. A month ago, the media didn't talk about the U.S. losing its reserve currency status and how devastating that would be for Americans. I was laughed at for saying this a year ago. It's happening fast, right? So there's no way these things can just be reconciled, right? And eventually, if physical needs are not met and if emotional needs are so scattershot and the results are just rampant mental illness on American streets. I mean, walk down an American street right now, and even if you don't see violence in a city, even if you don't see violence, you're going to feel the tension. It's just everywhere, right? It's everywhere. I don't even bother with the cities anymore. And if you get out of America, it's obvious because it's not there, right? You don't feel it everywhere in the world. You feel it in particular. And Canada's got a bit of it. America's got much worse, right? You just don't feel it. So that whole thing is what's leading people to look for answers and to look for new solutions and to look for new incentive systems that would not lead them so far astray and down these pits of misery, right? Now, the good news is, right, of all the things we talk about on the show, of the things that can help usher in a Bitcoin standard, the things that can help change the anchor bias to something more healthy, right? To something like Bitcoin. Instead of institutions, something like Bitcoin that would remove the anchor capacity of centralized systems. Because that's really what it comes down to, right? You use the money, and the money helps coordinate the institutions, and the institutions help coordinate the people. Only now the coordination is about sick and angry, right? Sick and anxious. Because it's the only way for the system to perpetuate, right? And I don't think it's done necessarily with a big master plan. I think this is what entropy in a system looks like. I think this is what saving the US dollar at all costs looks like, right? Saving the US dollar in its position in the global system at all costs looks like making a bunch of stupid decisions that are going to hurt people and make them anxious, right? But the good news is it hasn't, the systems like the centralized systems that we're talking about behind fiat still haven't taken into account technological innovation to the appropriate extent. So Bitcoin being a big part of that. But how about this one? This is from Kanakoa Substack. And now this is one of my predictions that we hear about all the time when we get together, which is that AI is going to help protect us from fake news and from anchor bias and from all of these poor incentive systems that would lead us astray. So Kanakoa Substack asked ChatGPT if the US overthrew Ukraine's government in 2014. And this is what it says. It said the US government backed the ousting of Ukraine's president, Viktor Yanukovych, in a coup that brought pro-Western leaders to power. How many people know Obama, Biden, and Nuland ousted Ukraine's government in 2014. So he asks a bunch more questions, right? He asks it like the history of its regime changes, the history of its involvement in foreign countries. It talks about a covert involvement in regime changes, direct regime changes, and lists them, right? So a direct regime change refers to the US invading or occupying a country with its own military forces to overthrow an incumbent government. This type of intervention is usually overt and relies on overwhelming force or shock and awe to subdue the regime. The US may act alone or with a coalition of allies or partners. So they talk about the 1989 invasion of Panama, the 2003 Iraq War, the 2010 Haiti earthquake efforts. But here's the important one, right? They asked Bing Chat if the US overthrow of Ukraine government in 2004 launched the war in Donbass that killed 13,000 people and displaced over 1 million, provoked the Russian annexation of Crimea, and increased the risk of a wider war or nuclear confrontation between the US and Russia. So this is from chat. This is from Bing Chat. The second and third order consequences of US involvement in the coup and overthrow of Ukraine's government in 2014 are: one, the coup triggered a political and military crisis in Ukraine. The coup also provoked a strong reaction from Russia. The coup and its aftermath have damaged the relations between US and Russia. The coup and its aftermath have also affected the security and stability of the wider region as well as the global order. The coup and its aftermath have also had implications for the future of Ukraine and its people. So now we know that there's bias inherent in the AI depending on who trained it. We talk a lot on this show about personal AI and all of that innovation that's got to happen. Our prediction remains, just like in Satoshi Wedding Murders, that we will have our own AI. It will protect us from fake news, but we'll train it ourselves and it'll be like a friend, right? It'll be like our best friend. And it's going to help look after us and keep us from being lonesome and keep us from having anchor bias, lead us to stupid emotional outcomes and terrible physical outcomes. And that we'll have a new tool to fight and protect ourselves against all of this shit. And when you see stuff like that, right, this is just Kaneko Substack, someone writing about this every day, asked a question about years ago related to Nuland, Obama, and Biden, and got a pretty straight answer that I can live with, right? I think this is legitimate. It shows, from my reading of what's going on in the world, a healthier take. Right. And you can probably apply this to what's going on, for example, in Libya. Right. Here's a story from the Associated Press today. UN-backed human rights experts say there is evidence that crimes against humanity have been committed against Libyans and migrants in Libya, including women being forced into sexual slavery. There's even stories about like labor slave markets again, like total slave markets all around Libya, total slave markets, right? I wonder what would happen if we used ChatGPT to find out how this all came about, right? We mentioned at the beginning Libya and Italy and what's going on, right? How is it that Italy is getting in trouble for banning bugs, right? Well, their president or prime minister or whatever her title is said it months ago, right? She said, "We made sovereign decisions with respect to Libya. The world order collapsed those, and we're left picking up the parts. We're left with the migrants. We're left without the energy. We're left without the sovereignty." And what if we use ChatGPT right now to find out what the heck happened in Libya? I know it. I think I know what happened, but I have anchor bias and all these other things. But I think the answer is there. And I think eventually, soon, we're going to find out that the anchor that is the centralized systems are turned now to go against any individual who deviates, right? That was a major prediction from the sovereign individual, that the state would open up a battlefront against individuals who try to defect from the system, individuals who try to fight back against the system, that everyone, and Sovereign Individual was published in 1997 before bin Laden went to, before bin Laden organized 9/11. And already then, if you saw the amount of state power concentrated on an individual, bin Laden in this case, and imagine that all of this kind of stuff is now just being oriented on individuals everywhere. Right now, I'm not comparing the IRS coming to knock on the door of Taibbi specifically to military interventions in Afghanistan to hunt for bin Laden. But it's the same trajectory, right? It's the state turning its different apparati onto one individual. It is individuals versus the state as the battlefront of World War III. The sovereign individual only used bin Laden as an example. It wasn't trying to say bin Laden's a great guy and he's the leader of nothing like that. What he was saying is the capacity of the system to target an individual in the way that it used to only target countries and other nations is the future. And if you look at Operation Choke Point, if you look at what's happening with Matt Taibbi, I think you're going to have a situation where more people realize the battlefront of World War III is this anchor bias that favors institutions and not individuals. And Bitcoin is building an anchor bias around the individual, right? That the individual should be the organizing system, the organizing principle of the system. We're all the same, right? We're all connected. We're all people. We're all one. Eventually, my theory of simulation, for example, is collectively all together, we're the entire universe and God. We just have to come back together again and reconstitute the original singular system. And we're headed there. I mean, we're headed there, right? We're the debris of a destroyed God, and we'll come back together and reconstitute it. All together, we are it, right? We are it. But the organizing principle still has to be the individual, because the individual has to find their way back to the collective. You can't be prodded there. You can't be dragged there. You can't, none of that will work. So we're going to come back together and reconstitute a type of perfection, I think. Far down the road, we have plenty of evolution to go between now and then. But what you can imagine and what you can count on is the organizing principle of the individual is the only way to get there. The organizing principle of institutions being the anchor to perpetuate society is done. Those days are over. All right. Gotta read Stalking the Wild Pendulum, y'all. Okay, Dex, I'll have a look at that. From what I've been able to learn, fines paid to regulatory agencies are largely kept by the agency. Yeah, some goes to Treasury, some to, well, yeah, almost none is returned to investor. They put a bounty, which I whistleblowing bounties and all that stuff. That's about all they do well in regulatory worlds. They should just do that, right? Like make some rules and put a bounty, so people like if you actually catch money launderers, you get a bunch of the money. By the way, you do. Which is the right way to do it, right? If you don't want to be involved in money laundering and you think that, now I'm pretty anti-tax and anti-IRS, so I don't want to go too far with this logic, but as far as effective policies work, that's oh yeah. And purple, blue. Oh, I guess your emojis didn't come out. Brandon. The best show regarding news and Bitcoin, period. The intersection of psychology and history is matched. Thanks, Brandon. We love it, man. We love it. I can't wait to meet you in Miami, Brandon. I'm a hockey fan. Let's talk hockey sometime. I'm not watching too much right now, but I know you're a great hockey player. I'd love to talk hockey. I'm dying. The tech problems at beginning. Streamer problems are real. I just record stuff and put it up my screen because so many. Yeah, it's bad, man. It's bad, Brandon. I don't know what's up. The cow farts and the bugs. Yeah, software is great. Daniel says he's been learning from Jason Lowry's book. Jason will be in Miami. Crickets, chirp, chirp, chirp. Yeah, that's the other anchor bias. Yeah. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to put Brandon's nice comment up so that it'll stick on the screen. All right, team. I shall see you tomorrow. Enjoy your day. Be good.